And then something happened where I was actually running a women's event where we were talking about violence against women. And a friend of mine actually came forward about something that had happened to her. And when she began sharing her experience, I went into complete shock. Um, and that actually spiraled me into depression. The psychologist at the school had shared that I had secondary PTSD.
I have to tell you, sexual disorders and abuse like that creates chronic illness.
We are going to have a very deep conversation with our guest. And the topic tonight is overcoming the impact of childhood sexual abuse. And so I'm going to give you all a trigger warning. If you think that this is going to cause you any discomfort or pain, it'll be up to you whether or not you want to watch this. And we do have a psychotherapist on board tonight, and she's there to not only help our guest and our audience, but you as well in our forever audience. And tonight we have a new and very special co-host, Dr. Annika Hurwitt. She is the president of coachingwomenleaders.com, and she is a very good friend of Dr. Roni's, who happens to also live on Martha's Vineyard. And Dr. Hurwitt is a renowned psychologist, psychotherapist. She has a unique blend of expertise in journalism and psychology. I find that very interesting. And for the past 30 years, she's been dedicated to teaching and writing about the groundbreaking discovery of how the mind works. We need to hear from her. This isn't just another psychological theory. It's about uncovering pre-existing principles for psychological balance and spiritual evolution. And we're going to know more about Dr. Annika. You're going to be called Dr. Annika from now on. So you're going to be coming on a show. I believe it's July 15th. We'll double check that, but we'll learn and get to know you a whole lot better then as well. And I just want to remind everybody that this show could not be possible without the brainiac creative mind of Jillian Murray. And she is at home in St. Martin in the Caribbean, and she is our leader, our inspiration, and she sometimes hurts herself. So she's a little bit banged up today. She had a fall, so send healing energy to her, please. And I'd like you to meet Sheela Krishna. Sheela is a courageous survivor of childhood sexual abuse. She's a whole human leadership coach and a transcendental sound healer. And she's going to do some of that sound healing with us tonight. So that we always love special things like that. So Sheela, I know you're going to, you already do this, but I believe that somehow you're going to create space for us here so we can heal and build a life that truly lights us up as well. So you have over 15 years in personal development, spirituality, and self-healing, and more than a decade as a coach. And Sheela has guided her clients through healing from grief, finding true love, boosting confidence, and crafting careers they truly desire. On today's show, Sheela will open up about her own journey with childhood sexual abuse, sharing how she overcame the trauma and the symptoms she experienced. She'll be talking about transforming pain into purpose and finding meaning in life's toughest moments. And she'll share with us how she found her voice and ventured into coaching and music, both of which played key roles in her recovery. get ready for an inspiring and heartfelt conversation with Sheela Krishna. And again, I'm going to give you a trigger warning. If childhood sexual abuse will trigger any pain or memories or anything like that, please, it's up to you whether you watch the show. And if it does, please reach out to a licensed psychotherapist, psychiatrist, tell your doctor, make sure you get some help and some healing. So with that, Sheela, I think healing does start when we learn to be more open. And I think you're going to be quite open with the audience tonight. Where do we start?
I guess I could just start from the beginning and just share a little bit about the context, because in our time together, I really want to focus more on the healing and how we can and what it takes to kind of just get onto the other side of this and what that looks like. I wanted to talk a little bit about things I really struggled with. So, and also my very non-linear journey. I want to give people a picture of what healing from this could look like. So I'm just gonna go with the flow. So for me, basically before the age of 6, I experienced sexual abuse by several people in my extended community. And some part of me shut it all down. So I didn't actually remember that I had these experiences till about 5 years ago. And growing up, I always struggled with things like erratic, like weight gain and weight loss. I was very dissociated, so really had trouble like being in my body and being present. Just this constant weight of shame, or like this heaviness of shame that I couldn't seem to shake. Anxiety all the time, never really feeling a sense of safety. And those were sort of, I think when I think about the sexual abuse, that is what really, those are kind of the major symptoms that I experienced as a result, and also challenges with sustaining long-term relationships. So really struggling with emotional regulation. Boundaries is another one as well. Knowing where I ended and others began, or knowing what was appropriate to communicate or what wasn't. So these were some of the symptoms that I experienced around my sexual abuse. But really how this journey for me began was, so back in 2010, I graduated from university. I was someone who was really high functioning, meaning like I was doing all the things. I was achieving academically. I was a national scholar. I was a community leader. So kind of on paper, I had it all going on, but internally I was constantly anxious and stressed and worried, and I could never seem to turn it off. And then something happened where I was actually running a women's event where we were talking about violence against women. And a friend of mine actually came forward about something that had happened to her. And when she began sharing her experience, I went into complete shock. And that actually spiraled me into depression. The psychologist at the school had shared that I had secondary PTSD, but I had no idea what that really meant. I was 22 years old, didn't really know much about mental health, psychology, all that stuff. I was basically given a label, told to like get through my final semester of school and graduate. And that's actually what I did, even with the secondary PTSD, which was, for me, I had an experience of pretty deep depression. But because I'm high functioning and when you grow up in a highly traumatic environment and you're used to surviving in highly traumatic ways, it's like, oh, okay, you just kind of like push through because that's how you survive. So that, but once I graduated and I was able to actually be at home, I just kind of like remember laying on my couch, basically sleeping, almost like sleeping all day, crying without any reason. And I remember just calling out to the universe, and I was like, okay, God, like clearly the way I'm living is not working. Show me the way. What do I do? I kind of just surrendered. And a few weeks later, I met someone at an event who told me about something called spiritual life coaching, and it was something that he did. And I had no idea what that meant, but I had tried, the traditional, at least at that point, the traditional methods just weren't working for me. And so I was like, okay, what do I have to lose? So I started working with this spiritual life coach, and he really did help me like come out of my depression and put me on the path of personal growth and development. And I have been working with coaches and therapists since 2010, and it was always like the changes were sort of like gradual, like little by little, but no matter how much I did or how much work I put in, it's like that deep shame and anxiety just could like never fully left. And I felt so, and I had done more work than most of my peers who were also in the personal development space. And I saw them kind of going, I don't want to, it's not a competition, but I could see them healing way faster than kind of like where I was, where I kept feeling like I was in this loop. And no matter what I did, I couldn't break out of this like crazy anxiety and chaos and dissociative sort of ways of being that I kept finding myself in. But then something changed. So back in 2019, I had a friend of mine gift me like tantric healing sessions, and just like it's like tantric massage basically. And I'd never done anything like that, but I was very open because until that point in my life, I hadn't had sex, and I'd rarely dated. And I think it was like 31 when I had my first kiss, which is like, considering general like developmental stages and milestones, that's not very, let's say, ordinary. And so I went to this person, and he worked on my body, and at the end of it, he asked me, he's like, have you ever been abused? And I didn't know what to say to that. I was like, I don't have any memories. I have a sense that something happened to me, but I don't know. Because what he expressed to me is like my body was super rigid and I was clenching and just had a really tough time letting go and just actually relaxing. And he shared that he'd worked with many women, and that I had all the telltale signs of someone who had been abused. So that kind of was like, okay, I don't really know what to do with that, but I felt compelled to come back. And I ended up working with him for at least another like 5-6 sessions. And then on my 7th session, what happened was I started getting memories back. So I would see these images of my abusers on top of me, like doing things. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I just started crying and bawling. And then I then started having intense pelvic pain like never before, that just kept me up at night. I suddenly lost my appetite. Some days I could barely get off the floor because it was like my body was just processing so much. And this went on for almost, let's say, like 2 months. but some part of me just knew this was psychosomatic. I knew this wasn't something physical. And I just, fortunately or unfortunately, I have a very high pain tolerance and pain threshold. But I just kind of did a lot of processing on my own until I found a therapist that I felt could really help me, which he did, to help me kind of regulate and help release all this repressed energy and emotion from holding on to all of this for so long. And to give you a bit of a metaphor of like what that process was for me, it's like, not to say it's about weight, but I had gone from a size 12 down to a size 4 in 3 months. So that's how much weight literally came off.
Off your body.
Yeah, my body, and that weight hasn't like, it's shifted a little bit over the past year, but that weight was pretty consistent, and I've never experienced that. Usually for me, I've always experienced like weight like this. And so once that shed, I still had healing work to do. So I again, like worked with several therapists over the years to learn about emotional regulation, working with my inner child, learning how to feel safe, feeling through my like all that pelvic pain, where I literally did things like pelvic floor yoga, sound healing, anything to help like shift that energy. But literally, I think the biggest thing for me about this process was letting go of that shame of, because for so long I felt a sense of like just being behind in my development, being always feeling like lost and confused. And once this piece clicked in, I suddenly experienced my womanhood. I experienced a sense of I had a stronger voice. I knew who I was. I had a sense of my style. Like I had a sense of my identity, because so much before that, my identity was linked to the people around me. So there were all sorts of things that occurred. And going and to tie into the other piece that happened with my voice. So while it was interesting, because simultaneously as I was starting to heal through this, I also started to find myself buying different clothes, different types of clothes, buying things that were more form-fitting, which I never did before, starting to wear like lipstick, which I never used to do before. And I started singing. And I started writing music, and I never thought that this was anything that I wanted to do, but I started to be more connected to my authentic desires. And until then, I was kind of lost as to, like what am I really here to do? What am I really here to create? But again, like once I started healing through this, like it's like I became more connected to my, like what I really wanted. Because I think what happens when you experience that, or at least for me, you lose a sense of trust in yourself, because it's like, oh, I followed my impulses and something bad happened, so I know I can't trust what I really want. I can't trust my voice. I can't trust people around me. And so that really damages your sense of self, and even like, because our creativity also is connected with our sexuality and our sexual energy, especially as women. Like we literally give birth to life, which is in itself a creative act. And so when that gets tampered with and tainted and manipulated, you learn not to trust it. So you don't follow your authentic desires, because you disconnect from it, because it was unsafe to follow that. So there's a lot of really interesting links and bridges. So I'm giving you a lot of information. So I hope I'm not too all over the place, but yeah.
No, I wanted to give you time to get as much out as possible so that we understood. And then we're going to get, bridge into things as we talk to both the doctors, Dr. Roni and Dr. Annika. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. I'm sure the audience is wondering. When you started to remember what happened, do you remember how old you were at that time when you saw these perpetrators on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember what age you were? Because I can't remember what I was doing when I was 3. My husband can, but I can't.
I did actually. It's strange how the body, or at least my mind, stores memories. Like sometimes, like one of the things sometimes you can ask, and I do this especially when I'm really emotionally dysregulated, is I'll ask myself, how old do I feel right now? And usually that will give me an indicator to where this emotion or this energy is coming from. And I mean, sometimes I would actually get visuals of me kind of like out of body. And while it may not have been how I visually saw something, I think it's my unconscious's way of telling me in certain pieces of information. But
it's
yeah,
like unlocking these memories that have been repressed.
A lot of it is body memory too, because especially when I started getting images and things like that, I was like, this can't be real. Like, is this how like maybe I'm just maybe I'm just making this up, or like I almost went into a bit of denial, because it's like, how could something like this happen, and I actually don't remember it happening. But then everything I went through somatically, it's like there's a book called The Body Keeps Score that talks about this. It's like the body doesn't lie. I'm like, I wouldn't have gone through all these shifts had this not been true. Yeah.
Can I ask, Sheila, where were you when this
yeah, this was so I was born in the Middle East. I was born in Dubai, so pretty much all of this happened when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was this at your home or other people's home when you went to visit? And like where? You don't have to tell us who.
Yeah, I think I want to just for sake of privacy, and I'm just gonna I'd rather not reveal that, but yeah.
And when did it stop?
It stopped when after I came to Canada, actually. I think there just got away from a lot of the people that were doing this stuff.
How old were you?
When we came to Canada, I was like 6.5.
So this all happened before you were 6, basically.
Yeah.
I just want to bring in Dr. Annika and Dr. Roni, and we'll get into the real questions, things that you brought up. I have questions. I know they do, and they'll have answers that I don't do. I don't have.
Sounds good.
How are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm still resonating with Sheila's story.
Yeah.
I've seen so many sexual abuse survivors in my 40-something years of doing this healing work. Very brave, first of all. And the fact that you discovered this at this age is amazing, because I tell you, some people that are in their 50s and 60s and still won't talk about it, and still in this disassociative kind of problem. And some of them are in denial and in serious depression and anxiety, and some of them are on drugs and alcohol, but they still have not come even close to where she is today. And I specifically remember I had a client here at my retreat, and she started talking about it. She was 56 years old. So first time she ever talked about it was here at my retreat at 56 years old. And it was a horrific experience, because I'm not a psychotherapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, none of that. I'm a naturopathic doctor healer. And I remember someone told me that that's what happens a lot of times when people go to retreats in disguise, that they want to get healthy, lose weight, something easy, like help me with my blood pressure. And then all of a sudden, this shocking surprise comes out underneath the carpet. And I didn't know what to do with that. So Dr. Annika that's her world, and she helps me, and I love her because, you know, she's helped me with some of my feelings. But I have to tell you, sexual disorders and abuse like that creates chronic illness. You know, people don't understand that the heart is affected by this. And it can cause cancer. And people say, well, how does that happen? Well, you can just imagine the years and years of holding it in, creating inflammation in the body, and all of those hormones are out of whack, and your cortisol levels are crazy, your adrenaline is crazy, and all of that. And you don't know why you're having these panic attacks. And then all of a sudden, like when you discover, wow, I was sexually abused. And so this deep denial just comes out, and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the fear, right? Why it doesn't come out, because you know something happened, but you're afraid to even find out what happened.
Yeah. If it's okay, I'd love to comment on that a little bit. Yeah, in terms of the chronic illness, it's really interesting because when I started getting my memories back, I started experiencing PMDD. And up until that point, I never really had PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I mean, I always generally had maybe like a little bit of like discomfort. I would get a little moody, some cramping, but never to the extreme that of symptoms I experienced when I started working through the abuse. Things like major mood swings before I would get my cycle. Things like it literally felt like my whole body was vibrating. Like I couldn't feel still inside myself. It was hard to get out of bed, like deep cramping in my pelvic region. And even, you know, so when I finally did have sex for the first time, which was only maybe like 2 years after I started working through my trauma, I remember it would take me like a week to recover because my body would go back into that massive traumatic kind of shock or experience. And what I will say is, because I stayed really persistent to healing through the abuse and healing the symptoms, I no longer have PMDD. Like, it's amazing. Like, my PMDD is gone, pretty much. And so what I also want to say, I mean, I understand though why people may not, like, why this is so difficult. Because when I found out, when the memories came back, it's like I had to rethink my entire like existence and like what I thought I knew about myself, and what narratives I created about myself, about the people around me. And it's like and then also for me, because here's the thing, right? Like, when you're young and you experience a trauma, if you have a caring authority to help you process in that moment that pain, right, to help you feel through the things, to help you explain what's going on, so that it alleviates some of that trauma. Because trauma happens when we make an interpretation that may not be helpful for us, right? Like, that's when we hold trauma, because emotions and pain, we're meant to like experience them, take in the information it's giving us, and then move forward. But when you're so young, and I didn't have people to really talk to who could help me process what had happened to me, it's like it stayed stuck in my body. And our body wants to heal. Our body naturally wants to come back to a form of like homeostasis, right? So sometimes it's almost like our body makes us more sick, so we're paying attention. So we start doing the things at least that's my perspective, so that we start healing. But I think sometimes we can but I can also really empathize why it's so hard. I have had to be extremely strong and and when I say strong, I don't mean strong in the sense of like committing to feeling all the feelings and all the ways through. Like, imagine like doing this to your body for 31 years of your life, and then slowly having to open up. It was extremely painful. I mean, there were times where I couldn't get out of bed because I was in so much pain, but I somehow, because I did really study a lot, it's like study a lot of psychology over the past decade and doing a lot of coaching, and just doing my own healing, I had a lot of knowledge to work with. So I knew inside of me, I'm like, I know this is psychosomatic, or like this is somatic. I'm having these effects as a result of my psychological experiences. So yeah, I'm really resonant with you on that. It's like, on the one hand, you know, I want to offer that, like, I understand why so many people don't, because it is so jarring, and we don't really have a supportive mental health system here in Canada. I'm guessing in the States. Like, I mean, I haven't, you know, like, to really help survivors get the supports and resources they need to heal. It took me so long to even just find like a therapist that knew how to be with me, because I've experienced gaslighting. I've experienced, like, you know, like, because they themselves haven't gone through the experience that I have. And so in many ways I had to be my own advocate. I had to like honestly, thank God I did all the, it's, my brain is brilliant, because it's like, of course I'll do like, you know, 10 years, 15 years of self work, and then my mind's like, okay, it's time to work through this one. I mean, I'm smiling about it now, but when I was like in it, oh, it was so tough, and it's hard to do on your own. Like, it's so important to have a supportive community. It's so important to have like the right type of therapy, and therapists who know how to hold that space for you. And also, I had the gift of time. Like, I didn't have to work full time. I was you know, and so not everybody has that. But, you know, it's strange. It's such a non-linear process, but I hear you around. Yeah, I just wanted to share some of my own experiences based on what you just shared. So yeah.
Well, congratulations. And it's beautiful to see you where you are today. And I always wonder, you know, where this person was. I just kept, because her story just stayed there. And I got a call one day, and I don't even know why I said this, but she goes, "He's dead." And I go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She goes, "No, it's the happiest day of my life." And
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's why people need therapists. But you know, she trusts me enough to tell the story and to say what she said. But I understand why people wait. She was 56. That must have been painful, all those
Yeah.
years, all those years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Roni, now Sheela has mentioned a lot of the long-term health effects that she felt. Are there any that you've heard about that through clients that you've dealt with that haven't been discussed here? Because she gave us a laundry list of
This
different
person
effects.
that I was just talking about, which comes to my, got cancer.
Mm.
You know, the day that she came to my retreat, we kept, you know, in contact. And she's a celebrity. And so that was even harder to come out, right? You know, so she got cancer. So, but I see it a lot: heart disease, cancer, and you know, sexual abuse is far the worst as far as I'm concerned. But you know, even with the physical and mental and emotional abuse, people carry these things. And I think the worst symptom that I ever saw, Sheila, was when someone disassociated. And she kept telling me she was on the ceiling looking down at herself. And she said she couldn't come down a lot. And I says, "Well,
Yeah.
how long are you on the ceiling?" She said, "At least every few days." And these are people, Dr. Annika, that don't get help because the fear is so strong inside them. They're afraid that if they do come out, the other fear is, I was told, they're afraid that they won't be helped.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Dr. Annika, I know we're going to go over time because this is such a good conversation. And I have so many questions. I just want to ask Dr. Roni one more thing, because I think it's important that we highlight this so that people really understand it. Like, you know, a lot of us just kind of brush it off. We hear about child trafficking as well, and we brush it off. You know, where do the 800 million, 800,000 children that go missing a year in the United States, where do they go? You know, mostly I would say to child traffickers. So we were going to have Harold D'Souza, a friend of mine, who is on the White House, or he was part of Obama's team. He runs Eyes Open International, but we'll have him on another day to talk specifically about child trafficking. But what happens to a child during this kind of abuse?
So, I was a pediatric nurse first, right?
Oh, okay.
So, and I dealt with some really serious, hideous types of crimes. I worked at Yale New Haven Hospital where, they ship these babies in, and it's even hard to talk about. But let me tell you what happens. Not only do these babies go into shock, but a lot of them have physical and emotional pain forever. And you ever heard of the story Sybil? They just become three people, two people, and so the safe person is another person, and then that fear person is another person, and they have multiple personalities. But at the time that it's happening, it's not just physical pain, but it's emotional pain, it's confusion, and it's fear, and it's all of these things put together. And that's why the way they cope is they start developing these out-of-body experiences. And it's insane what they go through, and it's just insane. And I can't even understand a monster that would do something like this to a child. But I guess it happens. I was in denial too when I first started hearing about trafficking, because we don't want to believe it, but it's true. And so what we see later on in life, we see the after effects of these types of children, and they're not good adults. Okay. The pain is still there. A lot of them hurt other people. A lot of them commit suicide. And you got to wonder what happened to someone that would just go into a school and shoot kids.
Yeah, the dissociation is something I can definitely relate to. It was one of my PTSD responses. When I had a trigger happen where I was followed by a man, and I starting to go into like a bit of like multiple personality. It was just that they kind of diagnosed it more as like a one-time kind of like psychosis episode, because that's not normally how I function. But yeah, it's really surreal, because it's all, and then I had a friend actually help me come back to myself, because I was sending her a message, and she was the one who said, like, something doesn't sound right, like you don't sound okay, like what's going on. And some part of me just like, I consciously came back to my body, and once I did that, I started getting back more memories. So it's almost this body's kind of strange response. And I wonder if Dr. Annika can speak to this a little bit, but like the body's like strange response to avoiding these really, really, really difficult feelings, because the brain hates change. So it's like, oh, I gotta like change my like, like I have to change. Let's not do that, and let's avoid. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I can definitely, I know what that's like, and it's not fun. And I haven't been like, I've really struggled with adulthood. It's like, I think in many ways, some of my behaviors has been very childlike, and I never understood why. And then once all of this has kind of come to be, and as I've healed, it's like suddenly I'm like, I actually feel like an adult. I'm behaving more like an adult. Whereas before I was very codependent. And in many ways. And so, yeah, I really resonate with that.
Dr. Annika.
Yeah.
I think you just take on a therapy session here. I don't even know what to ask you. I mean, we've heard about the shame, the sense of lack of safety, the long-term relationships that, you know, falling away, the boundaries, the whole PTSD, all the repressed creativity, that was actually something very interesting. I'm just going to let you talk for a little bit, just help us sort of
No,
process all this.
there's
all
so much, there's so much to respond to. I just want to say, Sheela, you know, listening to you, I have so much admiration for you. And you are such an example of, you know, what I learned. I actually specialized in working with women survivors of trauma
Okay.
for 10 years before I was introduced to this discovery of principles, which I've now been teaching for 30 years. And when I was specializing in women survivors of trauma, I was doing what most psychotherapists do, which is, you know, we just have this grab bag of techniques, and they were very helpful. But what I learned when I was introduced to these principles is what you are such an example of, which is that the human being, you know, at our core, we are innately healthy. And you are a shining example, Sheela, you know, because you know, I've been watching you this whole time, and you have such a genuine smile. Your
Yeah.
your innate health is shining through you, and you have been through hell. You know, you
Yes.
and you were such a small child, you know, and so you are such an example, Sheela, of being able to follow that thread, you know, that something was wrong, and then unraveling that thread and doing your journey, and then at the end, your innate mental and spiritual health is as intact as the day you were born. You know, and you know, at one point you said something which I've only heard, you know, myself say. So I was kind of stunned when you said, you know, if a child is in, I have said this so many times, if a child is in a safe enough environment and they have a traumatic event, they'll process it. They'll have their fear, they'll have their angst, they'll have their nightmares. Because they're in a safe environment, they'll process it and they won't carry it as a trauma, which is exactly what you said. Really, my mouth almost dropped open.
Yeah.
And when that's not the case, you know, it goes somewhere in our psyche, you know, until we are safe enough to be able to become present to it and let it move out of our system, which is exactly what happened to you. And so, and when we talk about multiple personalities, you know, again, to me, it's an example of how brilliantly nature has designed us. You know, if we're not in a safe environment and we can't process our trauma, when all else fails, we'll just develop some more personalities, some other place to put it, so that we can in some way navigate life until we are in a safe enough place. So, you know, that's the main thing that I want to say, that I so commend you in your courage. And I'm so glad that you spoke tonight, because having worked with so many, you know, I don't specialize in trauma anymore. I work with a whole lot of things, but having worked with so many women survivors, many women feel, you know, like damaged goods for life. And you emit an energy of health and wholeness and joy. I mean, there's light in you.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's possible. And I think that's why I'm talking about it, because I think many people think that they're kind of almost committed to like a life sentence.
right.
And I want to say that's not true. I think when you're equipped with the right resources and supports, um, this stuff is doable, and we are way more resilient and stronger than we think. That's one of my biggest takeaways for myself, because I did grow up with a deep sense of victimhood. Like, I did feel like a victim, and I understand why now looking back. But what I've also known now is, like, I have been through hell and back. And while that was not fun and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, it has given me a sense of knowing of how strong and resilient the human spirit is. And I'm really hoping to be an example and an inspiration to other women to heal, and that you are capable of more than you think.
Well, you are an example of that, and I think you're going to help so many women because of that, really change that perception, that one has to remain a victim. It's not true.
It's not at all true. And I find that there's not a lot of conversations about the impact of childhood sexual abuse in the mainstream. Like, having been really immersed in the personal development world for so long, there's so few conversations about it, but it's so rampant. It's actually scary how rampant it is. And so I'm hoping this is really great for me to be a part of, because I want more people to talk about this, because it exists.
Very much so. Yeah.
You'll be back, Sheila. You're going to be part of our alumni crew of hosts, and you probably hear from Jillian.
Yeah. So I'm gonna preface this by saying, so when I sing, people have a myriad of experiences. For some people, it's really calming and it's just really grounding. For some people have expressed like seeing like colors. People have expressed having all kinds of really interesting creative insights, intuitive insights. And for some people, it's also been it can be really activating, because sometimes it'll bring up the like the stuck emotions that just that are being asked to be felt for healing to happen. So just wanting to let people know, it can be a spectrum of experiences. Everyone has experiences something different. I'm going to quickly just guide you in and get you to close your eyes, and just take a couple of deep breaths, and then I'm going to sing. And then when I'm done, I'll just quickly guide you back out. So we'll do something relatively quick. So I'm just going to invite all of us to close our eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. Just letting go of that busy monkey mind, letting it go out for a snack or something. Let it be busy with something else except you. And I'm just going to start singing and just invite you to receive. So if you want to just take a couple of deep breaths and slowly come back into the space, you can open your eyes. So
I'm very warm.
yes, I know.
Okay.
People have, like I said, people have very different physiological, psychological responses to my, I call it a transmission. It's more than just singing. It's a transmission of energy that starts causing shifts in people.
I think I'm actually turning red. My shoulder, like why am I looking redder? I'm like red. Oh wow, that was I thought you were going to break out into a top 40 pop song or something.
Oh,
I was
no.
like, oh, we're going to hear her singing. Yay.
No, I mean, I
was
actually
like,
do
she has a
have,
good voice.
I do actually have more like songs with words. I've been creating. So this is one form of sound I do, which is just my tone. And that's where a lot of people will journey with my voice and get visions or have like these spontaneous physical responses. It's all in service for people's healing. But I've also started creating empowerment music. So I take Sanskrit mantras, devotional mantras, and I infuse it with lyrics that are all about promoting personal growth, positivity, and just more self-love and all the good stuff. The stuff that we want, that is good for us to have in our son, to kind of be like ingrained in our unconscious mind. Like I'll just do a quick one. So there's we are free, we are whole, we are one. There is nothing keeping us down but our thoughts. So that's another kind of form of music that I've been creating, thinking about what would I want to hear to support me on my healing and on my journey to keep going. So yeah.
Beautiful. Dr. Annika, did you feel anything?
Not physically. I felt I just entered a spiritual space. You know, it felt like it sort of created rooms in that spiritual dimension to be and kind of communicate, which is something that I'm quite familiar with, but your song or your toning or your sounds just kind of created space for that in a really lovely way.
So glad. Yeah.
Dr. Roni, have you ever done anything like that before? I never have.
No, she has a beautiful way of doing it, and I completely agree with Dr. Annika. It was a space that I went to, and I would love to have stayed there.
Yeah, I would have gone longer, but I already know we're over time. So like, we'll just come back down.
And you could do some great healing in that space. I believe that, I don't know if you know a lot about breathology, but the breath, like the song and the tone of what you bring to allows you to go deep and to bring beautiful thoughts and into your space. And that's what I was starting to feel.
That's beautiful.
I just want to say thank you very much, Sheila. And I know I'm going to be seeing a lot more of you because we know we have a place for you within our community. We're going to leverage the expertise that we have been blessed to have privilege of getting to know over the last few months with Feel Good, Share Good. And we, it all starts with healing, not only our body, but mind, body and spirit. So when we talk about detoxing from longevity, we're talking about going right down to our roots, right down to our gut, and going and just healing everything from, from every, as Dr. Roni always says, from a cellular level, right? So we have to heal ourselves from a cellular level. And when we do that and we get clean, we start building the foundation to, being the best version of ourselves, not just for us, but for those who love us. So I want to say thank you, Sheela, for tonight, because we may not want to talk about these hurt moments, but we almost have to acknowledge them to move forward for us to feel good. And if we don't recognize that trauma that has held us back from being the best version of ourselves for our family and for those that care about us, we're not going to be that person that will share the goodness in the future. So I want to say thank you for your story. Thank you for being another transformational story that we have each and every week. I'm very proud of what we're pulling together here. I still see the vision of, what you and I talked to initially. You were introduced to me by my beautiful friend, Maureen. My best friend said, you got to meet this girl, Sheela. Okay, I'm going to meet this girl, Sheela. And then we got on this call. The next thing I know is like, oh my gosh, we're having visions of retreats together. I can see it. I have this vision of a retreat. You're going to be at Martha's Vineyard. I can see it now. You're going to be hanging out.
I love that.
You're going to be doing sound healing along with so many other people. I can see it. I have it. I see the vision, but I feel it. I don't just see it. I feel it, just like I felt your vibration. So let's just share that vibration. Let's keep on collectively pulling that vibration together and not just talk about it. Let's feel it. When we feel it, it's going to happen. So when you feel good, you share good, you do good. And I know I say that I end the show every week with that, but that's our vision. And I want you to be part of it. And like Siobhan says, you'll be hearing a lot from me. You know that, right? So
yeah.
Thank you again tonight. And thank you for
you.
all the people in the background that have been helping out, just keeping the naysayers away. We've had a clean show tonight. This is great. We didn't have those naysayers coming in and expose themselves like we have in previous calls. So I thank you very much for helping us manage behind the scenes. And thank you, Dr. Ramonda, as always. We always love to hear your voice and your wisdom. And Annika, it was so nice to, Annika, I'm sorry, I will get used to it. But thank you for being here.
Oh, Gillian.
Yeah, you know what? I've been called worse, so it's all good. I have my own trauma. It's all good. Thank you for everybody tonight.
So I would love to leave our viewers with a last word from Dr. Roni.
Well, absolutely. I think this was the most amazing session that we've had. And I think that we all need to understand that mental health is one of the largest growing chronic illnesses. And every time I hear that, I just go, how did this happen? Well, two reasons. Number one, we have this under cared for population, and, when she talks about the sexual abuse, we have to understand that there's just so many people out there that are not being cared for. And we need more mental health psychologists, psychiatrists to understand that the children of the past is what's going to hurt our future.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Dr. Annika Hurwitt, it's been a pleasure to have you co-hosting, riding along with us tonight, and we'll see you again in the co-host seat. I am sure of it. Do you have any final comments?
Oh gosh, I'm very filled up, from our session tonight, from what everybody said, and I just really want to thank you, Sheela, for the message that healing, it isn't just that healing is possible, but thriving, and you're a shining example of that. And I'm just so happy to see it. So thank you for having me tonight and having, allowing me to be part of the conversation. Yeah.
And Sheela, this has, I think Dr. Roni pegged it, it's probably our most powerful show that we've had so far. And
Wow.
I'm honored to know you. I do see the same light that Annika sees, and I wish you all the best. And I hope that you're part of our team and our crew for years to come. We have great big plans, and I just wrote a grant that includes a retreat. So a great
Oh, look at that.
grant. So let's see everybody's good vibes. Send that off to the grantors, and hopefully that we'll have some funding to put together a retreat and a spiral farm. So what do you have to say to the audience listening now, the children who
Yeah.
are going through it or will go through it, and the ones who have and still haven't come out of that
Yeah.
dark
I,
bubble of fear?
as much, I think the biggest thing is to trust the process. And I say that because wherever you are is perfect. To trust your body will know when it's time to go there and how it's going to go there. And I say trust the process because when I was in my healing process, I had a lot of really intense panic attacks. Like I was like knees on the bathroom floor because trouble getting out of, like, I have been through it. And there were days where I didn't know how I would keep going or what was on the other side of it. And the only thing that kept going was just trusting that I'm alive for a reason. I've got breath for a reason. I'm meant to be here. And so I would say trust the process, no matter how crazy, chaotic, difficult, painful, strange it gets. Just keep going, because the next step is just around the other corner. That's what I want to say. Yeah.
And you have to look around the corner to see where you're going next. Absolutely.
Exactly. To believe it, because I think one thing I always had was this belief I could see this version of myself. I knew this version of myself was here, and I just needed to keep going to embody it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sheela, thank you for sharing. It's such a brave thing to do. You know, most people wouldn't share publicly. They probably wouldn't even share with their own family. So I appreciate you sharing. I think that you've probably started a healing journey for very many, many people tonight, and those who watch in the future. And I want to encourage everybody, if you see something, say something, right, Dr. Roni? I think that's what you were talking about last week when we were on. So shine a light on the abusers. If you know an abuser, doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or a sexual predator or, pervert, whatever you want to call them. See something, say something. Let it be known.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And I remind the audience to stay after the show if you want to talk to Sheela or Annika. Dr. Roni usually has to run, but you're still here. So thank you very much.
So good that I got people waiting, but
oh gosh, okay.
Thank you.
God bless you all, and thank you so much. And we'll see you again.
Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week.